just look at earnings. They don't look at asset value or physical assets, and so we like quite a bit of infrastructure. Airports, for example, one of our investments, which has been the airport group in Spain, where the government privatized it. Yes, Aena, and you just they'll never build a second airport at Madrid or any other places. These are, natural monopolies, and but that also applies to toll roads and railroads and telecom towers. There are many forms of infrastructure, transmission towers that are hard to compete with because they're natural monopolies where of course, some of these things can be overbuilt, like cable. So there's a form of infrastructure, but it's usually, and you have to look at the details of case by case, very unusual to try to, and usually you don't get the planning to build a second airport, so no economic case to it.
I mean, I can't remember how long they've struggled to get an extra runway at Heathrow.
Right, so planning, exactly, planning, and then roads, there's no economic case to build a second road or you don't have the land, so for different...
Chris is one of the best investors of all time. Period, the end.
Literally, no, so infrastructure is, physical assets is one.
I would say he's sort of neck and neck with Buffett on Buffett's career path. Age for age, if that makes sense.
A second is IP, but intellectual property. That's right, and which is so advanced, okay, that it's very difficult to replicate.
So what kind of intellectual property are you thinking?
One space we like is aircraft engines. There it is a very complicated product because the materials complexity, the engines run at such high temperatures that metals melt. And so many different things have to come together. Yeah, thousands and thousands of complex parts. So that's a business where there are only two players in narrow body engines and two in wide body. And there have been no new entrants for more than 50 years. The last new entrant was GE. And so that tells you something. Yeah, it's a big industry, but it's so complex, very hard to enter. Another barrier to entry is installed base, okay, which applies to the aircraft engine business. Once those engines are there, they, for various reasons, you get the spare parts business on it. And another of our barriers to entry is scale, although that's not a guarantee of competitive moat. Network effects is another important barrier to entry. You can see this in assets like Visa, Meta, two examples of network effects, and brands are another barrier to entry. But I'm not saying every brand is powerful, but you think about a McDonald's, it has a value. There are some brands which are powerful and sustainable, but not all. And I'll mention one more moat, which is customer switching costs. Take mission-critical software. Once it's installed, companies are very reluctant to mess with it and switch because of the complexity.
How important are recurring revenue streams for you when you look at businesses?
It is important, but the predictability of when they recur is not. Okay, let me give an example. So what's most important for us is something slightly different, which is essential product or service. We don't like things which are discretionary. Okay, so one space...
Sarepta is a good example of that one. And you can't make a generic gene therapy, so I love drugs where there's no generics. In fact, you can't. I'm not sure you can make a generic to their exon skippers either.
We've invested in for a long time is rating agencies. And here,
these are the people who basically give kind of character to different type of
yeah, they
bonds.
say, is it good or bad? Yeah.
Yeah. So the interesting thing about risks being priced in is this is sort of when you look at the discount rate. So if you have a moat, your discount rate becomes kind of zero in a lot of ways. That's one philosophical way to think about it.
To people who invest in bonds, they say, is it investment grade, non-investment grade, give for research, and if you like, bless it. And there, you can actually defer. An issuer pays for the rating, but they don't have to refinance their bonds, which is a big part of it, in any given year. They can delay and defer, but eventually the debt has to be refinanced and rated. And so and so I think essential need is the bigger point, but usually.
So you can have a zero discount rate, but the key is all cash flow streams eventually go to zero, right? So, for example, in pharma, the cash flow stream of a drug is virtually guaranteed. People are going to stop taking the drug. Once you're on a drug, you're on it, especially if it's chronic illness, right? But the patent expires, so your cash flow goes to zero. So what businesses have a moat? What businesses are going to stay around for 100 years? It's pretty hard to determine. If you look at the Dow Jones from 100 years ago, these are very weird companies that you may not have heard of. Dow Jones constituents 100 years ago. Let's look at them. There are 12 original companies in the Dow Jones, okay? How many of you think of that? How many do you think still exist? American Cotton Oil, American Sugar, American Tobacco, Chicago Gas, Distilling and Cattle Feeding, GE, Laclade Gas, National Lead, North American, Tennessee Coal and Iron, U.S. Leather, and U.S. Rubber. GE was the only one. So, just keep in mind that, some of them exist through M&A, no doubt. Businesses just don't disappear, but a lot of them are smaller. So keep that in mind. 1901. Copper mining, smelting and refining. You can combine all the mining companies, they still wouldn't be worth putting in a Dow. International Paper is kind of like a mid-cap now. So they're still around, they're just not valuable. So what moats, what cash flow will endure is the question, because when you have confidence, your discount rate drops. UNC status. Banks could be good, but banks depend on management. You make bad loans, that's the end of the bank. So that's not really a moat. It's tough. Steel, well, technology changed steel. Steel will become a little less important. Nothing stays forever. God did. That's the moat. God. Faith-based investing. The People's Gas, Light, and Coke Company. De cocaína, apparently. It was dropped from the S&P, or for the Dow. B.F. Goodrich, Western Union. Western Union was one of the biggest companies in the world. Westinghouse. Sugar refining. Sugar refining. The American Sugar Refining Company. What? the American Can Company, the American Beet Sugar Company. These were your leaders? Studebaker Corporation. Of course, they're Studebaker. I'm old enough. I remember Studebaker. I read the 10K. They had on this paper. You couldn't even turn the page. It was such brittle paper. But yeah, I remember Studebaker. You had to ask for the 10K at the annual meeting. I used to go to the meeting in a horse carriage. They send me the next 10K. It will come in 3 weeks after the results. Mack Trucks Inc., Sears Roebuck, Anaconda Copper Mining, Baldwin Locomotive. There's DuPont. That was a real one. You're real for that one. American Tobacco Company, I think, became Philip Morris. There's AT&T. AT&T was kind of a forever company, kind of like what Chris Hone is saying. I mean, what's the discount rate, right? And if you're trying to give these shares to your kids or something like that, then you kind of don't have a discount rate, right? As long as the cash flow is there, you're not really discounting it because, you know, the biggest risk, there's kind of like two, you know, what you learn, the first formula you learn in Briley Myers is this dividends divided by what? Risk. And you could do dividends divided by risk minus growth. And this is it. This is how you price an annuity, basically. Right? This is like the fundamental. We don't sell at API yet, but we will at some point. This is the fundamental. You know, every field has a fundamental kind of formula. This is the fundamental formula of finance. With this is kind of the key thing. So growth is something that's really important. All three of these things are important. So this is the cash flow. This is the growth of those cash flows. And this is the risk to those cash flows, including time, value, money, risk, and things like that. So if D goes down, you know, you have a problem because nothing else matters, right? The rest of the formula is irrelevant. If there's so if D is pre-planned to go down, like pharma, we know the drug's going generic. That's part of the game, right? But Coca-Cola, I was going to say KO. Coca-Cola, there's no plan, at least, for revenue to go down. So this dividend should be good, right? There's no game plan to that's not part of the business model. It's their plan is to grow. Now, can they grow is another question, but the game plan is to grow. But what's the risk? What's the risk that in 50 years they have no cash flow? And how much do I discount it by? If I discount it by 2%, that's my risk-free rate, or that's my inflation rate. Then my even 2050 cash flows matter, even 2070 cash flow matters. Risk is kind of subjective, and it becomes objective after you receive the cash flow. So growth really doesn't matter that much if you can secure the bag, and that you can believe that this dividend stream, this income stream is for sure, this discount rate drops like a rock. There's only so many companies that have that. That's why people focus on moats so much. And play around with the numbers, you know, open an Excel. What's going on with CoreWeave? CoreWeave's just insane. Up, down. So let's say a company is going to grow at 1% a year, but here's 150 years, 160 years of growth. And then I got a company that's going to grow 10% a year. No joke, 10% a year for 10 years. What's the more valuable cash flow stream? I know all of you people, okay? Yeah, you watching right now, you would say, why would I buy this company? That's crazy. I'd much rather buy this company. It's going to grow. Let's do the math. Yeah, you people. It's a lot of value there. Let's say $1 billion or $1,000, depending on how many zeros you want to put in front of it. It's 10 times earnings too. Not bad. This no growth company is worth 8 times more, simply because you can see that it's going to be around. And other investors will pay that premium. You don't have to live that long. What happens if the fast growth company just has a decay in cash flows? It doesn't go to zero, but it just decays. Doesn't change much. Doesn't change much. Added 30–40% to the matter. But if it starts declining really slowly, it's still going to decline to zero. That's the problem. Cash flow is a long time away from now. You don't know what the hell Microsoft's going to be doing in 2030 or 40 or 50, do you? Or Apple. You're just trusting the guys that are running it are going to be good guys, but how do you know? What if they hire Jeffrey Epstein? They don't know. Could be anything. Berkshire's assets have a moat. Berkshire itself doesn't have a moat. You guys aren't listening or processing this. It's the risk. It's the risk to the cash flows that matter. And that is embodied in the discount rate. If you discount the cash flows at 7%, you're saying that there's a good chance these cash flows won't show up. So you got to find the company that has the strongest. This is what this guy's been talking about. I don't know if you've been listening. Some of you haven't been listening. The strongest moats to cash flow.